Elegy written in a country churchyard. Thomas Gray probably began writing this poem in the year 1746. It was originally a somewhat shorter poem than the version he published in 1751, and some may have speculated that the poem may have been occasioned by an actual death, perhaps that of Thomas Gray's friend Richard West in 1742. When Gray designated his work as an elegy, he placed it in a long tradition of meditative poems that focus on human mortality and sometimes reflect specifically on the death of a single person. By setting his meditation in a typical English churchyard with mounds, graveyards, and yew trees, Gray was creating a beautiful tradition of elegiac poems. Some of the most beautiful poems in the middle of Gray's century were set in graveyards and meditated on death. The elegy is cast in 4-line stanzas or quatrains, in which the first line rhymes with the third and the second with the fourth. This AB pattern, at this time associated with elegiac poetry, gives the poem an appropriately stately pace. The last 3 stanzas are printed in italics and given the title, The Epitaph. In the elegy written in a country churchyard, the speaker strides the countryside at dusk, lamenting the deaths of all men, particularly the poor. He evokes the cycles of the natural world to meditate on the inevitability of death for all, including himself. The speaker is in a churchyard just after the sun goes down. It's dark. He looks at the dimly lit gravestones, but none of the grave markers are all that impressive, because most of the people buried there are poor folks from the village, so their tombstones are just simple, roughly carved stones. The speaker starts to imagine the kinds of lives these dead people probably led. Then he shakes his finger at the audience and tells us not to get all snobby about the rough monuments these dead people have on their tombs, since in reality it doesn't matter what kind of tomb one have when one is dead anyway. And all of us are going to die anyway someday. The speaker started to think about his own inevitable death. He imagines that someday in the future, some kindred spirit might pass by this same graveyard just as he is doing today. And that person would see the speaker's tombstone and ask a local villager about it. And then he imagines what the villager might say about him. In the end, he imagines that the villager would point out the epitaph engraved on the tombstone and invites the passerby to read it for himself. So basically, Thomas Gray wrote his own epitaph at the end of the poem.